Assalamu alaikum. We begin this session in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most compassionate and the most merciful. Inshallah, there's lots of goodness that will come out of this session this evening. Whatever good comes out of it is attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any mistakes or shortcomings are ours alone. My name is Zaida. I'm one of the trustees with Safina Muslim Cancer Support Network, and welcome to this session on understanding Islamic wills. Before we open the session, I'd just like to go over some housekeeping. So the session is going to be recorded, so if you prefer not to have your cameras on, that's absolutely fine. But if you do like to have your cameras on, please do switch them on. It will be lovely to see you all. This session will be recorded and will be available on Safina's YouTube channel. Nadia will share the link to Safina's YouTube channel where we keep all our videos if you want to have a look at those. This is very much your session, so please do make it as interactive as you like. There will be an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the session. Please do utilise the chat box to ask any questions. We'll hopefully pick up all those questions towards the end of the session as much as we can. If there's anything that we haven't picked up, we're happy to take those away and get an answer and respond to you. Please do be mindful of diversity of thought and opinion and the importance of being respectful at all time. This evening we will be joined by some colleagues who are not Muslim. So if you are going to use any phrases, any terminology in Arabic, please do translate that into English. Nadia will share some commonly used phrases that we will be using this evening in Arabic with a corresponding English terminology. So the content today is being provided by our Shield solicitors, and it is purely for educational purposes. Nothing from this content should be taken as constituting legal advice, and caution should be exercised before relying on it. Also, although we are very grateful and we are collaborating today with our Shield solicitors, we are not affiliated with them in any way. And if anybody wants to seek legal advice, please do carry out your own research and seek independent advice before selecting any legal representative or service. So before we open the session, I really like this opportunity to speak a little bit about Safina Muslim Cancer Support Network. For those of our people in the audience who haven't actually heard about us before. So we launched, it's going to be almost 3 years in March. And the reason we launched is that a few of us got together. We had all had experience of cancer, whether it was through personal diagnosis or through family and friends. And our sort of common experience was that although there was some great work being done by mainstream cancer charities, there was nothing specifically out there for Muslims who are impacted by cancer. Nobody actually understood our unique faith and cultural background. And our own research found that over 90% of the people that we surveyed felt that there was nothing specific out there for Muslims. And that's why we decided to set up Safina. And although Safina is predominantly set up for Muslims, our services are actually open to everybody. We will not turn anyone away, Muslim, non-Muslim, faith or no faith as well. So since we've launched, we have been doing so much, but I'm going to break it down into the 3 key objectives that we have. First is to provide a befriending support service to those people that have been impacted by cancer. And this is provided by our over 100 trained volunteers who've all got lived experience of cancer. We have, over the year, increased our services to providing bereavement support as well as palliative care services as well. Our second main objective is to go out into the Muslim community to raise awareness of cancer, to educate the Muslim community so that they can be aware of cancer and what the common symptoms are, so they can get early intervention and diagnosis as well. And hopefully through that work, break down the cultural barriers, the stigma and taboo that currently exists within the Muslim community around cancer. And the third thing that we're hoping to do more of is to look at the health inequalities when it comes to people with certain demographic characteristics. And sadly, people from the BAME background, which would include Muslims, wait up to 6 weeks before they get their diagnosis, and that can make a difference between life and death and the type of treatment and the kind of outcomes that people can expect. And we hope to change the narrative of that through the work that we do with Safina. I would really like to tell you a little bit more about Safina, but I'm conscious that I haven't got much time. But my colleague Nadia is going to share our website detail and email address in the chat box. So if anybody wants any more further information, wants to know more about what we do, please just do contact us. Just one thing I do want to say before I formally open the session is that everything that we do is underpinned by our faith and our culture. And we have got so much resources online about the faith aspects of illnesses like cancer and the power of dua. And we've also launched a number of books, for example, the book on hope and so forth, and the book on sabr as well. And we've also recently set up a board of scholars, which consists of 4 female scholars and 5 male scholars. And we've recently launched a Q&A service, a free Q&A service on our website. If anyone's got any questions which are health related, or it doesn't have to be cancer, it could be anything to do with illnesses, or even anticipatory bereavement, funeral related questions, all they have to do is go on our website, ask that question, and one of our scholars will answer that question. And that's a service that we provide free of charge. So this evening, we are joined by 2 special guests who are going to be talking about Islamic aspects of wills. And this is something that actually really surprises me, that if we have an exam, we put so much effort into preparing for that exam. If we've got a wedding, so much organisation goes into it. Yet the one thing that is guaranteed is that every soul will taste death. Yet despite this, we are very rarely prepared for this. And I was having a look at some statistics, and it showed that 47% of UK adults don't actually have a will, and that figure is actually much higher for Muslims. The statistics I came up with was 56%, which is much higher than the mainstream population. So I'm hoping that today you won't become experts in Islamic wills, but what hopefully you will get is some more understanding of what constitutes an Islamic will, how that compares to mainstream wills, and hopefully you'll be left inspired to either go away and get your will done, or go away and do some research, inshallah. So on that tall order, I'm really pleased to introduce 2 of our special speakers. First one is Sister Nasreen Akhtar, who is the founding director and head of wills and trust and probate of the team in Ashhill Solicitors. Prior to establishing Ashhill Solicitors, Nasreen lived and worked in Dubai, where she advised on Islamic wills and gift contracts. Outside her professional experience, Nasreen is a dedicated mother of 4 children. She's also the founding member of a charity called Happy Orphans. Nasreen is also joined by Sister Samina, who is also a lawyer at Ashhill Solicitors, specialising in wills. For Samina, it's really important to bring peace of mind to families who are going through situations where they are left behind and their loved ones have gone. She really recognises the importance of the fact that these families that members are left with the stress of dealing with the challenges that bereavement brings, and for her it's all about bringing ease in those difficult circumstances for families. She also has a very keen interest in tax savings and advises on estate and tax, and really pleased to have them both here. Assalamu alaikum, sisters. Over to you, the Sister Nasreen.
Walaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you, Zaida, for organizing this amazing and very important presentation on a very important topic of Islamic wills. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm going to start with a little bit more information about myself, and then I will share a bit more about Ash Hill Solicitors, and then I will hand over to Samina to present the main body of the presentation. And then we will have some time at the end for Q&A, where we both will be able to answer questions relating to Islamic wills. I'll start with a bit more information about myself. So as Zaida pointed out, I am a mother of four. I have lived in Dubai and worked there. Whilst working there, I did work on quite a lot of Islamic wills. We also did a lot of hiba agreements, which is a gift, the bequest within Islamic Sharia law. And about Ash Hill Solicitors, we are a small boutique firm based in North Harrow. We are a well-established firm. We have a lot of local clients from the North Harrow area as well, but we do also service clients locally, nationally, and internationally. We do offer a lot of elderly client care, and we do hospital visits, care home visits, hospice visits. So we do deal with a lot of end-of-life care, estate planning as well, which involves wills. We do probate. We deal with estate planning. We also draft trusts, court of protection matters, and lasting power of attorneys. So today's presentation is going to focus primarily on the important topic of Islamic wills. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Samina now to go through the main body of the presentation.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and thank you for joining today's webinar. What I'll do is, like Nasreen said, we're going to the aim is to give you an overview of what an Islamic will is and the inheritance under Sharia. Yes, the aim is to give you an overview of what a Sharia will is and the inheritance under Sharia. And I'll be breaking it down, covering three topics. The first one is the importance of a Sharia will. Secondly, the key essential principles of what makes a Sharia will. And thirdly, the differences between an English will and a Sharia will. So without further ado, we can move on. So next slide, please. So the first topic is the importance of having an Islamic will, which is the word wasiya. So I think let's start with the most basic and the most important reason. It's quite simply, it is a command of Allah, our creator, to basically making sure that when we pass away, all our money and assets, they are distributed in accordance to his rules, which is the inheritance rules in Sharia. So by doing a will, essentially, we are obeying an obligation which has been commanded to us by Allah, which is the main and the top reason of why we should be having an Islamic will. Similarly, by having an Islamic will, we are very much honoring a prophetic practice. So the most common hadith, which is often quoted, is the one on the screen in green. I'm paraphrasing. So as a Muslim, we shouldn't allow 2 nights to go past without having a will in place, which I think says a lot in terms of its importance in itself. And moving on to more practical reasons, by having a will, you would be complying with the religious obligation of maintaining family ties, so sila rahmi. The reason why I say that, or I've included it into the slide, is because in the field that me and Nasreen work in, unfortunately, it is very common to see breakup of family members and this family unit as a whole, and disputes arising when people pass away because of money and assets. So by doing a will, it goes a long way by preventing all of that, and it's extremely beneficial. And just by extension, those who are parents and have children, it is a huge blessing, and you have a duty to basically making sure that your legal affairs are in order and you don't leave any stressful situations for your children, because you would be fulfilling your duty as your children are an amana to you. And lastly, what I would say is another practical reason is just by having a will, so having it in writing, it gives clarity and transparency. So whatever your wishes are, it's on a piece of paper. So there's no ambiguity and it's all there. But specifically from an Islamic perspective, what you have the opportunity is to add Islamic clauses. So things like, I often include clauses that if an autopsy needs to be done post-passing, please let's not do that. And can you get by through an MRI scan instead? Secondly, I know it sounds very obvious, but we state that we would please like an Islamic burial. So what that includes is a ghusl, janaza, and a dafn. Now, this is particularly important, the last point what I've just mentioned, for our brothers and sisters who are reverts. Just very quickly, a case in point, which I'll share with you, is a couple of months ago, earlier this year, I was approached by a gentleman. He was born a Hindu, reverted to Islam 14 years ago. Didn't tell his family members. So when he approached me, he had sadly been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And when I did the will, I did say to him that it would be very helpful if he tell his family, which he did, because what that did was, towards the closer it got to his passing, sadly, there was tension between his families because they wanted the body released to give a Hindu ceremony for his burial or funeral wishes, whatever it was. But because he had a will, that overrode the family members. So we were in a position to seize the body and make sure that his wishes were honoured. So that just goes to show one very useful and powerful reason why an Islamic will should be done. Next slide, please. So let's put that in an example so we have a better understanding. So here we have Mr. and Mrs. Khan. They're in their late 30s. They're married in the sense that they're only married through nikah, so they don't have a civil registration. They have 2 boys and a girl, all aged under 10. Sadly, last June, Mr. Khan died of a sudden heart attack without a will, so he had no will in place. So Mrs. Khan approached me to carry out probate, which is the legal process that needs to be done when somebody passes away in this country. And in that process, the first thing what we realized was that because there was no will, Mr. Khan's estate was hit with a huge inheritance tax of £140,000. And the second impact or the consequence is that because there was no will, his assets or money was distributed in accordance to the English legal system, not Sharia. What we've got to remember is we live in England, so the English legal system applies to us. So because of that, because there was no will, there is a default system where if you pass away without a will, the English law system basically tells you how your estate is divided. So because of the consequences, we were left to basically rely on that. So the upshot is, number one, the main thing, Mr. Khan's estate as a Muslim could not be divided or distributed in accordance with Sharia as it should have been. And the sting in the tail was the tax, because had Mr. Khan seen solicitors, so people like Nasreen or myself, we would have saved him tax entirely, and we would have made sure that he honoured his Islamic obligation. So that hopefully illustrates some reasons why an Islamic will should be done. Next slide, please. So moving on to the second point, let's talk about what makes an Islamic will Islamic. So what are the key principles of the Islamic inheritance rules? So I think the first port of call is, where do we find these rules? So what dictates what Islamic rules are in terms of inheritance? So our go-to is the Quran, which is the primary source where we get those, where we get the rulings, and that is particularly in Surah Nisa, specifically verses 11 to 14 and 176. It is very detailed, where it states the relations and what share or proportion they get in terms of inheritance. It's very clear cut. It leaves no room for ambiguity. The next point is something that I actually wasn't aware when before I did the Islamic wills course, is that knowing the rules of inheritance under Sharia is actually a fard kifaya, meaning as Muslims, we have a collective responsibility to learn what those rules are, because moving on to the next point, it is a fard, so it's the highest form of obligation on us as Muslims to make sure that when a Muslim person passes away, their estate is divided in accordance with those rules, so in accordance with the rules of Sharia. Okay, now that very neatly takes us to what that order is. So in the Quran, our Creator has told us what that order is. So on passing, the first thing that we're allowed to use up from a deceased person's money is funeral costs. That's the first thing that's paid out. Number 2 is debts. So if the person has passed away leaving debts, that's paid off next. If the person leaves any gifts, so that's the legal fancy word on the screen, you can see bequests. All it means is a gift. So if the deceased has left gifts, that's paid next. At this point, whatever is left after having paid off those 3 things, that's basically divided in accordance to the fixed shares which is stipulated in the Quran. Okay, so essentially, just to break down the last 2 parts, is very simply, every Muslim, when they pass away, we can give up to 1/3 of our money to anyone. So it could be a friend, it could be a charity, anybody, but only up to 1/3, and it's optional. You don't have to use it up, but it's there. The remainder, 2/3 of the remaining estate, that's divided in accordance with the Quranic rulings. So the fixed shares, the inheritors which are predetermined. Next slide, please. So let's put that into a working example so we have a better understanding. So here we have Mr. and Mrs. Sami and Jasmine Saeed. They are both married, so this time legally and nikah. They're both in their late 50s. They also happen to have 2 sons and 1 daughter. During lockdown, their daughter got married in 2020, and her parents decided to gift her £100,000 as a gift. Fast forward 5 years, earlier this year, sadly, Mr. Sami died, but he did have a will. He had an Islamic will this time. So when Mrs. Saeed approached me for probate, so let's deal with the tax issue first. Because he had an Islamic will and it was structured properly, the inheritance tax was 0. And the way we do that is we incorporate trusts. So what we call in the industry is Mr. Saeed had a tax efficient trust-based will, which is the best form of will you can have, because it deals with, we're making sure it's Sharia compliant, so it ticks off all the Islamic criteria. And number 2, we deal with the tax, so we make sure that we save and we don't pay inheritance tax unnecessarily. So that deals with the inheritance tax. So let's see how the division works out, which is the crux of today's webinar. So when we dealt with the tax and everything else, what we did was we had to identify all of Mr. Saeed's assets. So house, savings, shares, the car, everything. And that totaled to £600,000 altogether. Next, we deducted the funeral costs, which was £10,000. Next, Mr. Saeed left a gift to a charity of for £10,000. So that's £20,000 used up already, which leaves us with £580,000 left for distribution. Now, this is where the Islamic division comes in. So the first thing you have to do is you have to establish the surviving family members. So in this case, we've got Mrs. Saeed, the surviving spouse, and the children, 2 sons and a daughter. The next thing you have to do is you've got to allocate their fixed Quranic shares. So in this scenario, the Quran says in Surah Nisa that in this scenario, Mrs. Saeed, as the surviving spouse, is entitled to 1/8 of Mr. Saeed's estate. If you like percentages, it's 12.5%, which equates to £72,500. The remainder is divided between the 2 sons and the daughter. But the key thing we've got to remember here is, again, in the Quran, in Surah Nisa, Allah says that when we have children, the sons get a double share. So the split is on a 2-to-1 ratio, boy to girl. Boy gets double. So in this case, in our scenario, the 2 sons each get £203,000 and the daughter gets half of that, so £101,500. Okay. Now, let me give you some variations so you have a better understanding. So let's assume that the facts are the same, but Mr. Said's parents are alive. In other words, the parents survived Mr. Said. In this case, they are also inheritors, so they would come into the equation. And their equation, again, in the Quran, in Surah Nisa, they are entitled to 1/6 each. So altogether, mom and dad, the parents together, get 1/3 if you want to simplify it. And it will be the same. So Mrs. Said, as the wife, would get 1/8. Parents together would get 1/3. And the remainder is divided between the children on a 2-to-1 basis. Let me give you one last variation so you have a complete picture. So sticking with the same facts, let's swap it. So instead of Mr. Said, Mrs. Said has passed away now. Okay, so the husband, Mr. Said, has survived and his share would be 1/4. So 25% would go to him. And then the remainder is divided on the same basis, 2-to-1 between the children. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a flavor or a clearer understanding of how the divisions work in Sharia law. Next slide, please. Okay, the last point I wanted to discuss was the difference between an English will and an Islamic will. I often see that clients get confused and are bamboozled when they hear these terms. So when we say English will, all we mean is that it's a standard will, but it just doesn't include the Islamic Sharia criteria. That's all it is. There's nothing else to it. Okay. So looking at the first difference, if you have an English will, so under English legal system, like I said, if we pass away without a will, there's a default system that applies and that dictates who gets what. It's called the intestacy rules. Okay. So in England, under English law, if you don't like that default system, then you must have a will, a physical will. You must have it so that you decide who your money goes to. Okay. Let's contrast that with the Islamic position. So in Sharia, technically speaking, you don't need a physical will because our entitlement applies automatically. So when somebody passes away and there is a relation, my entitlement is locked in, it's secure, it's in the bag basically. So technically we don't need a will. However, it's the key point that I keep coming back to. Because we live in the UK, the English legal system applies to us and its laws. So that because we don't live in a country where Sharia law is recognized, we have to have a will, because it's only by that action that we can say that when we pass away, we want our estate to be divided in accordance with Sharia rules. Okay, and by doing that, you are basically adhering to and complying with the laws of Allah, which has been obligated to us. Okay, and by doing a will, essentially we are overriding the intestacy rules as well. The next difference is the legal age of entitlement in the UK is 18. So whoever's passed away, if the beneficiaries, the people who are entitled, if they are 18, they take it automatically. Contrast that with the Islamic position. Entitlement is dependent on the age of maturity. Now, without getting into the fiqh side of issues, arguably, most likely that age can be a lot earlier than 18. The third difference, in English law, there's a term or a concept called testamentary freedom. All it means is that you and I, as people who live in the UK, we have complete freedom and discretion to decide who we give our money to. So it's a bit like famous people like Bill Gates, who famously have said that they will give their wealth to charities and not their children. So it's along those lines. Let's contrast that with the Sharia, the Islamic position. So as we've just covered, our entitlement is fixed by the Quran. We don't have that discretion. So in the Quran, it says exactly who gets what. It's fixed, it's stipulated, it's preordained, it's decreed. The fourth difference, and this is an interesting one. So if you and I, in our lifetime, so during our life, we make a gift, under the English legal system, that can be taken into account in my will and in distribution on my death. Let me give you an example. So if we cast back to the Mr. and Mrs. Said's example, remember the daughter got married during COVID and the parents gave her a 100k gift. So if they were to do an English will, the parents can say that on our death, we give our estate to our children as an equal split. However, minus £100,000 to our daughter, just to make sure that it's equal then. So you can do that. You've got that leeway to do that under the English legal system in a will. The Islamic position, conversely, doesn't allow that, because whatever you give away as a gift during your life, it's completely irrelevant. It doesn't even come into the equation at all, because it's completely separate. So in our lifetime under Sharia, you and I can gift whatever we want. So if it's a gift that we are making between our children, it could be on an equal split, it could be not equal, whatever. But this is widely there's a misunderstanding in the community, because a lot of comments that I get is, parents, they think that the inheritance rules apply during the lifetime, where it doesn't. So I hope that this misconception is clarified. The last difference is that under English laws, anything that I own in my name is subject to distribution on death. So anything that I own that's in my name is going to go into the pot, and that's going to be divided in accordance to my will. In Islam, it's not so clear-cut. We've got to be very careful, because any wealth that's acquired through impermissible means is excluded from forming our estate and therefore for distribution. So for example, if we have money that we got through theft, gambling, I know these are quite extreme examples, but fraud, riba, that has to be excluded. That cannot include as part of your estate. Okay, so those are the three topics that I wanted to cover. So next slide, please, Nadia. Okay, so in conclusion, I hope I've made it very clear that by living in the UK, it is extremely important that we have a will if we want to comply with Allah's obligation and command that our assets on passing are distributed in accordance to his laws, so under the rules of inheritance in Sharia. It's also an opportunity to basically make provisions as Sadaqa Jariyah. So as Muslims, we are akhirah focused, so we need to make sure that we make provisions for this life and the next. And a will gives you that opportunity, because in the will, remember I said about the 1/3 making gifts, that's where you cover Sadaqa Jariyah. Okay, and the practical points that I mentioned was that a will goes a very long way in preventing family disputes. You only need to sit with Nasreen and I, and even a day, 24 hours would not be enough. We could tell you, how disputes in the family are on the rise, unfortunately. Okay, and the other practical points is something that's very passionate to me is, when you do a will, you have the opportunity to maximize on the inheritance tax allowances and therefore avoid paying inheritance tax unnecessarily, which is eye-watering in some cases. So just to end, if this anything that you take from this webinar is, if you take no action in your life, then please consider and think about what is the true cost or the consequences of your actions. I'm a huge believer and a huge advocate of making sure that people are responsible, proactive, and you need to take control of making sure that your ducks are lined in a row and making sure that your legal affairs are all in order. So what I would urge everybody is that let's make the intention to take action and do the right thing. Okay, that concludes my talk. So I'll hand over back to Zaida and we'll be ready for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nasreen and Samina. The three areas that I try to avoid and avoided for most of my adulthood life is tax, pensions and probate. And you've made this session really easy to follow. You've certainly inspired me to look more into it, inshallah. We do have some questions. The first question we are going to take is from Zulfi. And his question is, the way I read Mr. Said's example, the property was in his name. What if the property was jointly owned and is not owned outright, e.g. mortgage? What would that require the sale of the house?
Smina, shall I answer that?
Yeah, we'll take it in turns, yeah.
All right. So if the property is jointly owned between spouses, the English law would be overriding. And in the UK, in England and Wales, we have a law of survivorship, which means that if one person, two people own the property together and one passes away, the whole passes to the surviving person. So we have, when we're drafting Islamic wills, we generally will make sure that we've had sight of the property, title deeds of the property, so that when we're drafting the will, it's also compliant with English law as well. Does that answer the question?
What I can add to that, what we would also do is when we do Islamic wills, we take that point very seriously and we try to demarcate the assets very clearly. So there is what we do is we deal with that. So we are very clear who owns what when it comes to our property. And just to touch on the second part of your question, it's not necessary to sell anything. We deal with the distribution without selling. So there is a way we can do that as well. Clients always assume that we have to sell something to make the distribution. That's not the case.
Thank you so much. Next question is from SH. If you don't own bigger items like a house, let's say you only have smaller items such as a savings or a car, is that then split across?
So whatever you own. So on passing, whatever you own, even if it's possessions, so clothes, furniture in the house, £100 in the bank account, it's all assets. And under Islam, the same inheritance rules apply. It doesn't matter whether you're a millionaire or you're of modest means. It's the same principle.
And also to add that when we draft wills, we try to do it in such a way that it's going to be for life for you, unless you have major changes in life happening. So we will not list specific assets or properties in the will. So because you might later on sell the property or buy another one. So we try and make it generic. So, but generally the will cover all assets, even if you acquired more assets later on.
Thank you so much. Next question is, what about situations where family assets pass from one parent to another via English law? When second parent makes a will, can you correct the earlier transfer issue?
Smina?
Yep, absolutely you can. But then what we've got to make sure is we need to distinguish, because we live in the UK, I often have to remind clients that we're wearing two hats constantly. We've got to comply with Sharia, but we've got to be in keeping with the English legal system as well. And it can be quite tricky. So we've got to make sure that both are, in sync, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting question from Abbas. As you said, in Islam, sons are traditionally given twice the share of daughters in inheritance, but many parents today feel it's fairer to treat all their children equally. How should this be approached in a will? Is there a way to respect both Islamic guidance and keep things fair and peaceful with the family?
Smina, shall I answer this one?
Yes, please.
Well, generally, obviously, we have to respect the contents of the Quran because that is what we adhere to. But there are ways that things things can be done fairly only in lifetime. So, for example, I mentioned HIBA agreements earlier. So that was something that we did for a lot of clients in Dubai, families where they had they had a lot of assets, very wealthy. They wanted a Sharia will, but they had daughters as well. So they made sure they did HIBA agreements, which basically means lifetime gifts. So you pass on assets in such a way so that it's equal for all your children, but you have to do it during your lifetime then. That's the only way. Everything else has to be in accordance with Sharia. If it's not, then it's not Sharia will.
And just to clarify, is the lifetime gift in their lifetime, or does it come into play on their passing?
Well, so Sharia law is actually very clear and it's very simple to follow. So HIBA, it has to be in your lifetime. You have to hand over the control and the ownership of whatever asset you're giving to your daughter, for example, during your lifetime. It can't happen at death, because then it forms part of your estate and it's a will.
It's really clear. Next question is from Nasima. From the example you gave from the Said family, if you didn't have an Islamic will, what would the family have got?
So without an Islamic will, so we're falling in the default territory. So because we live in the UK, the English legal system and the rules apply. So it's the intestacy rules, a default position of the English legal system that applies. Without getting complicated, there is a way where we can still apply Sharia law, but that comes with a few hoops or we need to pass a few hoops to do that. But I think to answer your question in high level, it's the default English legal system that applies, which is why I emphasize that in order to override that, we must have an Islamic will.
Thank you. Next question is from Hina. I made a will during COVID with a Muslim charity, but I don't have a written copy and I can't remember much about that will. Can I just make a brand new will?
Why not?
So,
absolutely.
Yes, definitely. Yes, you can make a new will. And as soon as you make a new will, you don't need to look for your old will. The new will override any other wills that you've ever made. So yeah, definitely. Anytime you can make a new will.
Thank you. Next question is from Maham. I have a disabled son. Should my will also include who and how he will be cared for?
Yeah, so I think in my presentation, I may have made it look like it's straightforward, but we do cover very complex family situations. So that's where the trusts come in. So many of the circumstances and the consequences, we cover it by creating a trust. So in your question, you mentioned about the disabled son. We would cover it in the trust, and that would be sufficient to make sure that the son's needs are met and everything else. So there is a way, absolutely.
And just to add to that, we have dealt with a scenario with a disabled member of the family, and there are huge tax savings for that. So it would be a shame not to take advantage of that for the family and for the person who's disabled.
Thank you. Next question is from Abbas. For those with property or assets overseas, for example, in South Asia, do UK solicitors usually handle those as part of the same will, or does it need to be managed separately in that country?
It is possible. It's often tax efficient to have multiple wills in different jurisdictions, because when we extract grant or probate in England, and it depends on, it's a very complicated answer and question as well, actually, because there's also the issue of domicile as well. But generally, it is good to have your assets protected by one will, but depending on different jurisdictions and which country in particular you've got your assets, it's better to have multiple wills. But we can obviously give specific personalized advice to clients. But generally that would be the answer, yeah.
Thank you. Next question is from Alia. For a mother who has 5 daughters, all in their own homes, so no one would potentially be living in that home, would that house then be sold and split between the 5 daughters? If no will is written, will the house still be divided equally to all 5 daughters?
This is where the confusion happens. So because there are 5 daughters, in Islam, it's a Sharia principle that there will always be a male mahram who will be included in part of the inheritance. So we'll need to figure out who those male mahram would be, but that person would be included. And in terms of the split, like I said, we don't have to sell anything. We can just allocate the shares on paper. So by transferring shares, but if it means selling, we'll sell it, and then the net proceeds of the sale, we will distribute it in accordance with the Sharia, the fixed shares.
But if there's no will, and somebody's living in England, under the intestacy rules, those 5 daughters would then be entitled to the whole estate. So, and if the property did have to be sold, then the proceeds would be divided equally between all 5 of them.
Thank you.
If there is no spouse. If there is no spouse.
And next question from Zulfi. Would an obvious solution be lifetime giving?
Can be. It depends on your circumstances, your aims, your objectives, the dynamics of the family. People often think that it's a straightforward document, a will. Let's whip it up in an hour. We take a very detailed approach. We need to know a lot of information. So it's we need to have a deep dive in terms of fact finding and everything else. So it's not as straightforward as
Brilliant, thank you. Tahir and Louise asked a question about whether the session will be run again. Inshallah, we will run these sessions in the future, but this session is recorded and it will be available on Safina YouTube channel in about a week's time. Nadia will share the details of Safina YouTube channel on the chat. Next question is it a good idea to have a power of attorney for medical and financial scenarios, as otherwise the court would take responsibility?
Absolutely. I always say that a lasting power of attorney, an LPA, it goes hand in hand with a will, because the will comes in play when you are not here, whereas an LPA covers you during your life. So it makes sense to have both. They go hand in hand. They complement each other. So absolutely.
Thank you. Next question is from Tahir.
Just to add there that failure not to have a lasting power attorney actually leads to a lot more problems later, because if the person lacks capacity or they've become terminally ill suddenly and they can't make decisions for themselves, for their health or their financial matters, then the family are left to have to make an application to the Court of Protection to become a deputy then for that family member. And that usually involves a lot more costs, delays and stress for the family. So it's always best to have a lasting power of attorney.
Thank you. Next question is from Tahir. If we have joint property, not with a spouse, but a parent or a brother, for example, and can't remember, but may have opted on passing the asset share for the living to the living named person, or may have set up a trust, can you check this when preparing the will?
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the preparation of doing a will. So anybody who has properties, we download the title register from the land registry to make sure that the right. So there are 2 types of co-ownership. So we do that by default. Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Next question is, well, there's 2 questions. First question is a standard Islamic will required to adhere to a specific template, or can it be drafted using conventional methods? And second question is, as a single parent, are there different Islamic wills for such parents?
So I think let's just to emphasize, Islamic inheritance is extremely simple. So like I said, if you want to give a gift, you've got up to 1/3. The rest you have no choice over. Okay, so there's no such thing as a template. I mean, we would do it because we live in the UK and we've got to make sure we save the taxes and everything else. But in the most basic form, just think about if you want to give up to 1/3, because the rest you don't need to worry about. That's taken care of. But just to cover the other practical points, that's where you need to be thinking about templates and things like that. And it just depends on the family circumstances. So we need to think about the types of trusts, how complicated the trust has to be, how many. So it depends on the circumstances and who we have in front of us as the client.
And just to add there that you should always avoid using a template. We deal with a lot of contested probate as well, and it's so common that people have downloaded a will. You don't have to come to us, go to any other solicitors, but do not get downloaded will, because it creates so many problems for the family later.
One thing I'll quickly add, Zaida, is if you are going to follow a template, whatever you get it from for an Islamic will, that is, I can guarantee you it will not take care of the inheritance tax, because far too often I've seen those templates and it's very basic. All it covers is what I've just said, 1/3 and then the 2/3 Islamic shares, that's it. But there's no consideration given in terms of saving inheritance tax. And I always think it's a hugely missed opportunity. Hugely.
And especially so for our community, I think, or a lot of the Muslim community, because traditionally we own properties, and that's where that it's hard to avoid any reducing liability for inheritance tax, and that's why you need specialist advice based on your own personal circumstances to make sure there is some mitigation of the tax for you.
Thank you. Next question is from Rizwana. There are also a growing number of families where there is divorce in the family and grandchildren or siblings getting favoured treatment. How are wills then distributed equitably and non-discriminatory, married versus divorced children and descendants?
I think it goes back to making that distinction, that what can mum and dad do in their lifetime to make gifts to those children who have had divorces, and then the rest. The will Islamically, apart from the 1/3, you don't have control over the inheritance. I hope, if I want to hammer that point quite clearly, we do not have control. The sons will get double, and I know for most parents, but mums especially, it's a very hard pill to swallow. But what we do have control is what we can do during lifetime. So what I would suggest to the person who's asked the question is, mom and dad need to sit down and discuss how can we make sure this is equal, because that's what you have control over.
Thank you so much. I think we have answered more or less all the questions. Thank you so much. I know there's quite a lot of questions, Mina and Nasreen. So thank you for answering those diligently. Any sort of final passing comments that either of you would like to make?
I would say that if making your will has been something that you've been leaving aside to do later, and that a lot of people are guilty of that thought, but we don't know how long we have to live, or when some things might change suddenly. So get your affairs in order. The best thing you can do for your family is put together your will so that they are protected and taken care of. And also, when you go back to your creator, you want to do it the correct way, not leave it to the intestacy rules of England and Wales, because that is man-made law, and that is what will be applied to your estate. There is no question about it.
What I would say is,
much. Go for it, Mina.
What I was going to say is, aside the fact what Nasreen just said about, we need to comply with our religious obligation, you've got to think about the tax savings. We live in a time where this cost of living crisis, tax rates are going higher and higher. We're being squeezed, and I would have to say the Muslim community is very relaxed about this. And it may not be the parents who feel the effects, but it certainly will be the children. most of my clients, it's the Muslims one who have done no tax planning, and I'm having to write a huge check to HMRC, and it's deeply regrettable, because if only the parent had done estate planning, that money would be going to you, not HMRC.
Thank you so much. I gave you both a really tall order, but alhamdulillah, you both delivered on it. I feel really inspired by this session, and you have made a very complicated area sound so simple and straightforward. And you've definitely inspired me to go away and do my research and make sure. I do have a will, but I'm going to go away and make sure that it is Sharia compliant as well. So thank you so much. Just wanted to end with a short dua and a prayer, and that is, Ya Allah, please place blessings and rewards for everyone who contributed, attended, organised, or supported in any way, especially Sisters Nasreen and Samina, and everyone else at Safina Muslim Cancer Support Network. Ya Allah, please grant our sincerity, accept our efforts, and allow the good to continue beyond this gathering. Ameen. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you so much, Nasreen and Samina. Assalamu alaikum.